Good day, everyone. We will previously we are done discussing about rational equation and rational inequality. Now we will be discussing on how to graph rational functions. And these are the things that you need to recall. First, we should recall on what is a domain. So, and I think you know it already. What is a domain, right? So we already discussed about that. Domain is a set of values that can make your x defined. So those are possible values of x that will be called domain. And I will be giving you the procedure later on how to find a domain of a given function. The second is the range. So range is for the possible values of your y. This is for the possible values of x domain, and y is the possible value of range. Okay? And the third one is for your x-intercept. In solving for x-intercept or determining the x-intercept, you just let your y be equal to 0, then you solve for the possible values of x. And somehow it is also called as zeros. Okay? Those are called zeros. So aside from that, you should also determine, aside from the x-intercept, you should also determine your y-intercept. So again, you should be looking for your domain, range, x-intercept, y-intercept. By the way, what is an x-intercept? An x-intercept is a point wherein your graph of your function and your x-axis will meet. So asa say for example, your graph look like this. So for example, this is your graph. So your x-intercept must be here. So the intersection between your x-axis and your graph. While the y-intercept is the point of intersection between your y-axis and your graph. In this case, this is your y-intercept. Okay? So we will have example about that later. And then the other two that we need to discuss are we have to determine the asymptotes. Asymptotes. There are two types of asymptotes. We have vertical asymptote, and we also have horizontal asymptote. So if you say asymptote class, it's a line wherein your graph will get closer and closer to. So for example, in this case, for example, this is your this is your vertical asymptote, and your graph must be somehow like get closer and closer to that line. Ingon ani, duol siya dito, but it will not cross that line. It will just get closer and closer to that line. In this case, this line is an example of your vertical asymptote. And if you say horizontal asymptote, it should be horizontal that way. Okay? Let us have an example so that you will understand what I am talking about. Okay, let us have here. Okay. By the way, balikan to na. Announce na to ang example. Let us have one example here. I will just go over later on the procedure on how to find the domain, range, x-intercept, y-intercept, horizontal asymptote, and vertical asymptote. Okay, let us have, say for example, we have the function. Let us have here. Okay. So we have here this one. Never mind the instruction. All we have to do is to graph this one. Okay. We are, as for example, we are asked to graph. Okay. Kindly mute your microphone. Okay. So say for example, you are asked to graph this function, rational function. As we all know, this is a rational function because there are two variables here, the f of x and the x. The f of x is somehow your y, right? That is just your y. So, and it is a rational expression. So therefore, this is a rational function. So first, we need to determine this. Number one, we need to determine the domain. The second one is the range. The third one is your x-intercept. The fourth one is your y-intercept. And the fifth one is your vertical asymptote. And lastly, your horizontal asymptote. And out of that, it will help you on how to sketch the graph of your function. Let us start with the domain. How to determine the domain of your function? Kasi kabalo on how to find the domain. Anyone who can tell me on how to find the domain of a function? Anyone who can tell me on how to find the domain of a function? What do you remember in your junior high school? Anyone? Okay, wala na nakinumdum? Okay, in finding the domain of your function, what you will be doing is, you should solve for your, let me admit them. In finding the domain, what you will be doing is you solve for y in terms of x. Okay? You solve for y in terms of x. Actually, this one is already in y in terms of x. Something like y lang ni din x ra po ni diri. Because the f of x is just y, right? So y in terms of x. That's the procedure in finding the domain. And what you will be doing is, you need to determine when this portion here in the value of x becomes undefined. Now, let me ask you this one. Kano sa ma-undefined ang real number? Or kano sa ma-undefined ang number? Can I ask Miss Dakot? Kano sa ma-undefined ang number, Miss Dakot? Jeneline. What do you remember? Kano sa ma-undefined? Naay cases nga ma-undefined, no? I'll give you one. Ang number becomes undefined if inside the radical is a negative number and the index here is even. Example, square root of negative 2. This is undefined, right? But this is not a problem here because we don't have radical in the rational function. So another thing, kano sa ma-undefined? A number will be undefined if the denominator becomes 0. Yes, if that becomes 0, that will be undefined. Now, let me ask you, kano sa ni ma-0? Remember, you can factor out this. Can you factor out the denominator? Can you factor out the denominator? Can you find factors of 12 in which you add, it becomes negative 8?
6 and 2, sir.
Yes, you can have it here, negative 6 and negative 2.
And
if you multiply them, that is positive 12. If you add them, it becomes negative 8, right? So in that case, you can rewrite that denominator. You can rewrite that denominator as x minus 6, x minus 2. And here, you just copy x minus 5, right? So if you look at here, kanus ama ma-0 ang imong denominator. Or of course, you just equate each of these factors into
Yeah,
0.
but then that is equals to 0.
So it will be undefined if your x is 6, negative
Equals to
6,
0.
positive 6 rather, and this is x equal to positive 2. Agree? Kani nga mga value ang imuhang function mahimong undefined. Klaro? Because when x is 0, when x is 6, this becomes 6 minus 6. It becomes 0. 0 times any number is 0. The denominator becomes 0. The same thing when x is 2. Because 2 minus 2 is 0 times any number still that is 0. The denominator becomes 0. Okay? So these two values can make your function undefined. Okay? So if you are looking for your domain must be, by the way, domain is denoted by D. It will be all real numbers except the numbers 6 and 2. Okay? So it means tanan nga mga numbers, if you will graph it, in your real number line, in your Cartesian coordinate plane, tanang mga numbers diri magamit except ni 2 o ni 6. Okay? Tanang values ni x magamit. Remember, domain is for x. Tanang value ni x magamit except ni 2 o ni 6. Clear? Sabtan? So your domain will be all real numbers except 6 and 2. Sir, saan ni pag-determine sa kano siya ma-undefined? So the only way is to factor out your denominator just like what we did here, and you equate each factor into 0. That's why we get this 6 and 2. Okay? And remove that in the set of all real numbers, and that will be your domain. Klaro? Klaro ba, class? Is it clear? Just want to hear from you. Is it clear? I want to see thumbs up in your coming from you if that is clear. Yes, Eliza, do you have any concern? Are you raising your hand, Eliza?
None, sir. None, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, let's continue. Wala pangutana, no? So I think domain is already clear. Again, you are looking for the possible values of x. Well, for the range, if you are looking for the range class, you should solve for x in terms of y. Babaliktad. Dapat x lang din in terms of y. Okay? So that's it. That is for the range. While how about the intercept? So if we are looking for the intercept class, if you are looking for the intercept is, let's focus with the x-intercept. In finding the x-intercept class is, you are going to, sa imong x-intercept class, you are going to let y be equal to 0, then you solve for the value of x. Okay? You solve for the value of x. By the way, class, if you are wondering, sir, wala lagi gahatag og example sa range. Anong wala nimo gipangita ang range sa number 1? It takes up time if we are going to solve for the range of this, right? Because we will be expressing x in terms of y. Maybe we will have another example later, okay? Wherein we can give the range nga medyo dali because we don't have enough time to discuss for that. Maybe we will have another time to discuss problems about this in finding the range. Okay. Now, again, in x-intercept, you just let y be equal to 0, then you solve for x. So in this case, in the number 1, remember this is y, right? If you let y be equal to 0, this becomes y equal to 0. And it will be x minus 5. And you just copy the denominator x squared minus 8x plus 12. And as we all know, the denominator here is 1, right? So you can cross multiply them. So 0 times this expression is also 0 because any number multiplied to 0 is still 0. 1 times x minus 5, your x minus 5 also. Because this is just 1 times x minus 5. So in this case, your x is equal to positive 5. Right? So in this case now, class, it will tell you that your x is 5 and your y is 0. At this point, dira mag-meet ang inyuhang graph sa imong function, ani nga function, and your x-axis. Clear? So you just let y be equal to 0, then you solve for x. Now, how about for the y-intercept? For the y-intercept class, what you will be doing is the other way around. You let, change it to red para maklaro gamay. You let x be equal to 0, then you solve for y. The other way around for your y-intercept. X-intercept rather. Okay? So if we're gonna consider this one, so this is your y, right? So y, then you just let your x be equal to 0. So if you let this be equal to 0, then it will be now 0 minus 5. It will be 0 squared minus 8 times 0 plus 12. And if you continue solving it, it becomes negative 5 over 12, right? So at this value, your x is 0 and your y is negative 5 over 12. So at this point, your graph of this function and your y-axis will cross. Okay? And at that point, they will intersect. Am I making things clear, class? Nasabtan? Uy, nasabtan ba? Is it clear?
Yes,
Miss
sir.
Tan, is it clear, Miss Tan? Mamangkaw, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So let us have, how about the asymptotes? Oh, in determining, let us start with the, let's continue with the vertical asymptote. In the vertical asymptote class, pare-parehas sa procedure sa pagpangita sa domain. In the vertical asymptote, you just solve for y in terms of x. Okay? For the vertical asymptote, where is that? It's horizontal. It's a vertical asymptote, yes, here. In looking for the vertical asymptote, it's the same procedure in finding your domain. Okay? You solve for y in terms of x. And then after you do that, say for example, ang result ninyo is y equal to, katong kaganina, x minus 5, x, ito, minus 6, no? X minus 2, right? So kung naimo nang ningon ana class, after that, in finding the vertical asymptote, you just equate each factor from your denominator into 0. Just like what we did a while ago. Equate it to 0, equate it into 0. Then the resulting equation now, it will be equal to 6. It will be equal to 2. If you draw that one, class, it will look like this. It will look like this one. Okay. The x equal to positive 2 is somewhere here, right? Ana ang case. And your x equal to positive 6 is somewhere here. So probably your graph will get closer and closer to this line. Okay? So the same as a procedure sa pagpangita sa domain. This is the procedure in finding your vertical asymptotes. Okay? For your horizontal asymptote. Okay. For your horizontal asymptote, what you will be doing is you just for your horizontal asymptote, you just follow this one. For the vertical asymptote, you remember the three cases. There are three cases for you to remember in the horizontal asymptote. You just look at the degree of your exponent in the numerator and denominator. Just this one. Okay, let me give you this form. Say for example, your function is given of this ax to the n plus a sub 1 x to the n minus 1 and so on in general form. While in your denominator, it goes this way. It will be bx to the m plus b sub 1 x to the m minus 1 and so on. Okay, kini lang timanan class. Again, it should be of y in terms of x. Ang tanawon lang class, you just look for the exponent of your numerator. The highest exponent of your numerator. And the highest exponent of your denominator. Okay? Again, I will repeat. You look for the highest exponent in your numerator and the highest exponent of your denominator. There are three cases here. What you will be doing is, if your n, kining n diri, kining highest degree sa inyong numerator, is less than your m, then your horizontal asymptote is automatically y equal to 0. Example, I'll give you an example. Y equal to x plus 1 over x squared plus x plus 2, right? If you look at here, your n is 1, right? Your n is 1 and your m is 2. If you look at here, 1 is less than 2. So that will fall here. So automatically, this function will have a horizontal asymptote of y equal to 0. This is your horizontal asymptote. Okay? Sabtan class? Binasabtan ba? I just want to hear from you. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
The next thing is, for the case wherein m and n are equal. Kung parehas daw ang value ni m ug ni n, kanido silang duha, ang ilang highest parehas, then you just get the numerical coefficient from your numerator and the numerical coefficient of your denominator, and that will be your horizontal asymptote. Example, I'll give you this example. Y is equal to 3x squared plus 2x plus 1 over 4x squared plus 2. So if you look at here, the highest exponent of your numerator is 2, right? While in your denominator, the highest exponent is also 2. In this case, your n, the highest exponent here is 2, and your m, the highest exponent is also 2, and they are equal. So your horizontal asymptote now, class, must be given by y equal to 3 over 4. Sabtan? That will be 3 over 4. Okay? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we will have more example later. Okay, for the third case, the last one, it will be the case if your n is greater than your m. Say for example, I'll give you y equal to x cubed plus x cubed plus 2x plus 1 all over x plus 1. If you look at here, the highest exponent n here is 3. The highest exponent here is 1. And n here is greater than your m. So in this case, automatically you don't have horizontal asymptote. No horizontal asymptote if that is the case. Kung mas dagko ka ni degree sa numerator kaysa denominator, no horizontal asymptote automatically. Okay? Let us have one solid example nga makomplete na to. Let us have one solid example. Okay, let us have it here. By the way, any questions so far before we proceed? Any questions so far?
Wala, sir.
Wala. Okay, let me erase it and let us have, maybe we will we will use the whiteboard so that we can have it clear. Kindly tell me if you can see the whiteboard now. Can you see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
example, the
Yes,
given is y is equal to x plus 5 all over x minus 1. Okay, by the way, my question is it a rational function?
Yes,
Lady
sir.
Antonia, what do you think? Is it a rational function? Tugahan.
Yes, sir.
It's a rational function, right? Because it contains two variable x and y, and this is a rational expression. Now, unahon na to ang domain. So, ang gani pagpangita ang domain, class? Kanumdum pa, ganina. Anyone? Did I mention? What
Solve
did I mention?
y in terms of x.
Very good. Is it already in y in terms of x?
x.
Yes, correct. Is it already in y in terms of x? Y rabanid in x rapodere. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, wala
Sir.
na problema. So it's already given in terms of in y in terms of x. So what is next is you determine kanus ama undefined ang imong denominator. Of course, you equate this denominator into 0. So your x is equal to 1, right? So only when x is 1, your domain will be undefined. This is the Cartesian coordinate plane. Only here, this value of your x, your function will be undefined. It means kani silang tanan diri na ay mga portion sa graph, diri pud nga portion, kanila nga portion ang wala. Walay portion sa imuhang graph. Okay? Next. By the way, let us give here your domain is all real numbers except the number 1. Okay? You read it as all real numbers. By the way, all real numbers man di ba? Ang real number line. That is why it is called real number line. It consists of natural numbers, integers, as well as rational, mga decimals. Okay. We also have the range. How to solve the range? How to solve the range? Anyone can tell me?
Solve for x in terms of y.
Very good. You will be solving for x in terms of y. And how to do it? You may cross multiply here, right? So you may multiply them. So it will be now, if you let us write it here, it becomes x, y minus y. If you multiply this portion here, and if you multiply it here, it becomes x plus 5, right? Right, class? You get it?
Yes, sir.
Since you want to solve for x in terms of y, so tanang mga terms nga na ay x, ibutang sa left side, katong walay x sa right side. Okay? So in this case, kani i-transfer sa pikas, it will be x, y. It will be negative x. You transfer that to the other side, it becomes positive y plus 5. Agree? Agree, class?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And after
Yes,
that,
sir.
since we want only x, so we factor out x. And if we factor out x, what will happen is, it will only be y minus 1. Agree? And we want only x, so you divide both sides by y minus 1. Para mawala ning y minus 1 diri. It becomes 1 because any number or any expression divided by itself is just 1. So it will be x is equal to y plus 5 all over y minus 1. Now, let me ask you, is it now x in terms of y?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes, no?
Sir.
So in this case, you can now determine for what value here your y is undefined. Of course, you get the denominator and you equate it to 0. And it will only be undefined when y is equal to positive 1. Because when y is positive 1, this becomes 0. So your range here is all real numbers except 1. Clear? And if we're gonna look at here in the Cartesian coordinate plane, mo man ni ang y-axis, no? Di ba? X-axis atong focus ganina sa domain. Karon y-axis. Amo nang 1 na diri, no? So it means kaning nga mga values din naa ni graph unya, kaning nga portion na ay mga graph except ana nga point. Ana nga portion. Okay? So that is for your domain and for your range. Sa pag ito sunod class, sa pay wala. Sa pay wala. Hey.
X-intercept, sir.
Yes, the x-intercept. How will you solve for the x-intercept? Anyone can recall? How to solve for your x-intercept?
Let y equals to 0. Solve for x.
Okay. Again, you will let y be equal to 0, right? So for your x, this is your range. Give it your range. So your x-intercept, you let y be equal to 0, then solve for x. Now, let's go back here. If you look at here, you let y be equal to 0. So, unsa na resulta karon class? Can you tell me what will be the result when y is 0? It becomes now 0. You look at here, you change it to 0. It will be x plus 5 all over x minus 1. Agree? Again, we go back in our original given. Klaro ba, class?
Yes, sir.
So this
Yes,
is
sir.
just 0 now. So if you cross multiply them, this is 1 here. You cross multiply them, 0 times any expression is just 0. 1 times x plus 5 is x plus 5, right? If you solve for x, your x now is equal to -5. So it means your intercept now will be the point. What is your x? That is -5. And your y is 0. So it means at this point, ang inyong x-axis o ang graph ani mag-intersect. Amo na dapita ng -5, 0. Amo na dapita. Adri, no? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So somewhere here mo cross ang inyuhang graph o ang x-axis. Okay? So that's it for your x-intercept. Next is for the y-intercept. Saan gani pag-solve sa y-intercept class? Nakinumdum pa. I-mention ka ganiha.
Let x equals to 0, y equal to 0.
Yes, you will be setting your x be equal to 0, then you solve for y. For your y-intercept, you let your x be equal to 0, then solve for y. Okay, solve for y. If you're gonna do that, let's go back here. You set x be 0, so it will be y is equal to 0 plus 5, 0 minus 1. So it is just equal to 5 over the -1, or simply it's -1, or simply -5. It means your y-intercept will be the point 0 for x and y is -5. Okay? If you plot it here in your Cartesian coordinate plane, so it must be somewhere here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So somewhere here, your graph of this function and this y-axis will cross or will intersect. Okay? Sa pa sunod? Sa pa ito sunod class? What's next? Sa pa wala na ito na
Vertical
Vertical
asymptote.
Yes,
asymptote.
the vertical asymptote. The vertical asymptote. Saan gani pag-determine ang vertical asymptote? It will somehow have the same procedure in finding your domain. And we already have this one. Automatically, your vertical asymptote is the line x equal to 1. Amo ng x equal to 1, class. If we plot it here, if we change it to yellow, it must be somewhere here, right? X equal to 1. So it means your graph will get closer and closer to that line later. Okay? That is x equal to 1. Now, next, what is next? Your, sisunod gani? Kasi wala pa.
Horizontal.
The horizontal asymptote. Horizontal asymptote. How to find the horizontal asymptote? There are 3 cases, right? Now, tanawan ninyo ni. Saan nga case? Case 1, 2, or 3?
Case 2.
Una nga pangutana. What is the highest exponent in your numerator?
1.
1. Very good. Your n is 1, right? Now, how about in your denominator? What is the highest exponent in your denominator?
1.
1 also. So it means your m
One.
is also 1, right? So in this case, your m and n are equal, right?
1.
Kasi giingon ka ganina kung equal ang m ug ang n?
No horizontal asymptote. Asymptote.
Uy, ang no horizontal
Ay,
asymptote
dinisyon.
class katong
Katong ano,
ang
sir?
numerator kaysa denominator. So,
Ang A of
remember,
B.
it should be y
Value
equal
sa A
to
of B.
a over b, right? Where in this a is the numerical
Yes, sir.
coefficient beside here, and this b should be the numerical coefficient beside here. And in this case, your a is 1 because of here, and your b is also 1, right? Taro no? So in this case, your horizontal asymptote should be y equal to 1 over 1 because your a is 1 and your b is 1. So somehow it is just equal to y equal to 1. So ama ng y equal to 1 class karon. Kini nga portion y is equal to 1. This line, dira nga line, ang imong graph mo get closer and closer and closer to, but it will not cross that line. Okay, is that clear, class? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
O
Yes,
dili
sir.
pagyapon complete. We already determined the domain, the range, the intercepts, x and y intercept, the asymptotes, the vertical and horizontal asymptote. But we are not yet able to determine the graph. So what we should do is, the next thing is, you will factor out the numerator and the denominator if possible. If dili na sila ma-factor out, kana na sila ang inyong i-equate. So in this case, it will be y equal to x plus 5, x minus 1. Kaya dili naman ni ma-factor out, no? So you can equate x plus 5 into 0. Kini dili na po ni ma-factor out, you equate x minus 1 equal to 0. So it will give you x equal to the negative of 5, and this one will give you x equal to 1. Clear? Naklaro, class? Uy, naklaro ba?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, dire, aha maning x equal to the negative 5. Kinino? Kani nga portion, no?
Yes, sir.
Kana nga portion. Ang x equal to 1 is here, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, let me ask you, what are the intervals nga atong mahimo? Para bitaw sa rational inequality, di mo makahimo tag interval ani? Pila ka interval ang mahimo?
Tulo.
Tulo. What are those 3 intervals? What are those 3 intervals? By the way, class, dili na nato i-consider diri ang open ba or closed or half open, half closed. Automatically open siya always. Basta rational function. Atong gamiton always open. Dili na ta magamit og, unlike sa inequality nga, i-determine pa nato nga appeal ba na nga point or dili. So in this case, you have the interval from negative infinity to 5. Negative 5. Agree? Kanina portion, di ba?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And the other interval will be sa pangalain ng interval.
Negative 5
Negative
to
5 to
1.
1.
Let me adjust it para natin enough na space. Ako sa ni-erison nga portion. Or 1. So we have this portion. Inalan mo gutag enough nga space ani. So the first interval that we have is from negative infinity to negative 5. Other interval that we have?
Negative 5.
Open
To
interval
1.
from negative 5 to 1. From here until here. Right? No? Sakto?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir.
The other interval that we have will be the interval from
Open
One.
interval from
1
1
to
to
positive
positive
infinity.
Positive infinity.
Very good. That's it. So what we will be doing, class, is atuaning tanawon kung unsa ihang sign ani. Si x plus 5, x minus 1, ani nga mga interval. Okay? So unsa ka man na pag-determine, sir? So what you will be doing is you get 1 point inside that interval. Unsa ka nga point atong pilion diri? Any value.
Negative 6.
Negative 6. And
Negative.
we will be substituting it here. When x is negative 6 plus 5, positive or negative?
Negative.
It's a negative, right? Negative. In the denominator, that is negative 6 minus 6, it's also negative, right?
Yes, sir.
Sakto, no? So negative
Yeah.
divided by negative becomes
Positive.
positive. So it means this portion is positive. Agree?
Yes, sir.
So as long as you get 1, as long as it is inside here, that will be enough. Next, let us have one value here. Can you select?
0.
0.
0.
When x is 0, 0 plus 5 is positive, right? 0 minus 1 is negative. Positive divided by negative is
Negative.
negative. So this portion is negative. By the way, you may select also any value, ha? Anyways, the result is the same. Okay, here. Unsay sign diri? Unsay nga value katong gamiton? What do you want?
2.
2. If we select 2, 2 plus 5, that is 7, positive, right? Here, 2 minus 1 is also positive, right?
Positive.
Positive.
Positive divided by positive is just positive.
Positive.
Okay. Now, unsa day gamit ani nila, class? Okay. Kung makita gani ninyo nga positive, it will tell you, class, nga kini nga interval, ang inyuhang graph is above the x-axis. Pasabot, naa diri sa babaw ang iyang graph. Sabtan? Naa diri sa babaw iyang graph. Clear? Okay. Now, unsay pasabot kung negative? Naa siya below. Ang iyang graph ana naa below the x-axis. It means naa di sa ubos ni x-axis. X-axis man no? Nasa ubos niya iyang graph. Ana nga interval. Kini nga interval naa diri iyang graph. Kani nga interval naa diri sa babaw. Kuha ninyo? While if it here, the graph is above the x-axis. So it means in this interval, from 1 to positive infinity, ang ihang graph na diri sa babaw. Na diri sa babaw. Either diri or dira sa babaw. Okay? Ato nang i-graph karon. Ato nang i-finalize ito ang graph. Let me change it to color. The first one. Haga ni ato ang unahon na to. Asa mo cross ang ato ang graph sa x-axis. Can you tell me? Aha mo cross atong graph sa x-axis. At what point? Anyone? Let us go back with the x-intercept. Sige ingon ni x-intercept? Sa x-intercept.
Negative.
So diri, it means our graph will pass to that point, right? Agree? Okay, our y-intercept. Asa siya moagi? At 0, negative 5. Kinino? Kana. So it means our graph will pass through these points. Muna'y gamit anang intercept. Sunod. vertical and horizontal asymptote. Our vertical asymptote is this line, right? This is your vertical asymptote, and this is your horizontal asymptote. Now, it will tell you that your graph will get closer and closer to this line. Okay? Will get closer and closer to that line. So, if we're gonna plot our graph, muagi siya ani, muagi po siya ani. Then mo getting closer and closer to this line. So it means your graph will look like this. And will look like this. Agree? Agree, no? Now, anong nakabalo ko? Because my graph will get closer and closer to that horizontal asymptote. And it will get closer and closer to this vertical asymptote. Why I plot it here above? Because I know that this is positive. This interval from negative infinity to negative 5 must be above the x-axis. So, anong dili man dito sa babaw? Because, naaman mo, agi man ani nga point. So, dili yun na diri sa babaw. Naagyo na diri sa ubos. Aning horizontal asymptote. Pero above the x-axis. Okay? Pero above the x-axis. Now, sir, kanong diri man? Because it will pass to that point and this point. So, naagyo na diri. Right? Now, my question is it below the x-axis? Yes, it is below the x-axis. Right? This is your x-axis. So, it is below. So, it is considered here. Now, the other one. Sir, from negative 5 to 1. So, it will until be here. Right? It will get closer and closer to this line also because this is your vertical asymptote. So, it will look like this. Now, if you look at here, kini lang nga portion ang wala nabutangan og graph. Now, let me ask you, asa ang graph? Is it here, here, or above? Would it be possible that your graph is here? Pwede, dire? Pwede diri ang graph? Mo close dira, mo close po diri? Pwede dili. Now, let me ask you this one. I'll give you a scenario. Can I plot my graph here? Can I do it? The answer is no. Ano man? Anong dili man? Giingon diri kini nga unsa ning interval class?
What?
Unsa ni?
To,
Yes.
from 1 to positive and
Yes. Unsa yang giingon?
above.
Yan, namin sa below sa x-axis ni nga portion. So dili siya pwede. Kuha ninyo? So dili ni siya mao nga graph diri. Now, so solve na ta diri nga portion. Dili na ni pwede magamit ni nga portion diri. So it should be here above. Right? Sir, pwede man ni nga portion nga above diri. Nya mo get closer and closer man daw ani nga line. So dili pwede dinhi. It should be above. Kuha ninyo? Kaya kung dili ninyo ibutang mo get closer man diri mo below ni diri sa x-axis. Right? So it should be here. It will get closer and closer to that line. Okay? Let me change it to blue para makita nyo. Anang blue mo na inyong graph. Okay? Question? Now, let me ask you now. Let's go back with the domain. Kung saan mga value ni domain? Tanan daw real numbers magamit except ni 1. Nagamit ba tanang values ni x? Kung ay mga values tanan ni x, di ba dito? Tanan. Nagamit ni tanang nga portion kang x, taman kang negative infinity. Nagamit ni nga value di taman kang positive infinity. Wala nagamit si 1. Anong wala nagamit si 1? Your graph will just get closer and closer to that line, but it will not cross. So wala nagamit si 1. Right? So tanang values ni x nagamit except ni 1. Agree? So na atong na-consider ang domain. Now, ang range. Nagamit daw tanang value ni y except ni 1. Kini. If you look at here, if you look at the perspective of y, tanang values ni y nagamit. Right? Tanang values ni y nagamit diri nga portion. Diri, nagamit ni tanan because you have this graph. And also this portion nagamit because you have this graph. Ang wala lang nagamit kining 1. right? Because this is your vertical asymptote. Clear? Uy, naklaro ba?
Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
this
sir.
is now the
Yes,
graph
sir.
of your horizontal rational function. Any question? Question?
None, sir.
Okay, I
Answer.
think
Sir.
we will not take it long since you don't have any question. So I think that's it. And hopefully you will remember those things. Okay?